And again, delighted to welcome to the first time to the program, at least to my knowledge. I don't have the greatest memory. Elizabeth's been here before. Elizabeth, welcome back. Thank you for joining. And Mr. Moore, I'm a Moore is here and never been here before. Mr. Moore, welcome in.
Thank you. Good to see you. And this is my first. This is my first time.
Very happy to have you here. Elizabeth, get off your phone. Number one. Just kidding. Elizabeth, what advice do you have for your co-panelist here? Right. And then you worked with Chairman Harrison at the DNC, right?
I did. So I spent 3.5 years with the chairman, and then left there just before the 2020 election.
Yeah. And are you still working in politics now?
Well, I work for a public affairs bipartisan firm now, so I just work on issues across the board, but basically serve as a Democrat. Basically doing what we're going to do with Elizabeth. I do that for a living.
Yeah. And do you do mostly corporate work or political work?
Yeah, mostly corporate, no political.
Yeah.
Thank God. Thank God.
And you don't have a Southern accent, even though you're from New Orleans, right?
Well, Baton Rouge originally, but spent a lot of New Orleans.
Yeah.
But
can you speak in Southern?
Oh, if my mom gets on the phone, I can.
Yeah. And now you live in the District of Columbia?
Yes.
Okay. How's crime seem to you?
It's low this week, just like it was a couple weeks ago. So it didn't seem much different.
Okay. What neighborhood do you live in?
I'm over by the wharf in the waterfront area.
Yeah. Okay. Elizabeth, welcome in. Do you have a favorite New Orleans restaurant?
You're asking me? I don't even think I've ever been there.
Really? It's one of America's great cities.
Do they have kosher restaurants?
I was going to ask that question. Do you know? Elizabeth keeps kosher. Would she be able to eat that? She would not be eating shrimp and grits.
No, she wouldn't. She'd be dreaming about it, though.
Yeah. I have so many friends in New Orleans who would love to show you the many kosher restaurants, how they keep kosher. There's a huge population down in New Orleans.
There is a historically, Elizabeth, there is a very they're not Orthodox Jews, but they are kosher. No. They're kosher keeping Jews, and there's a great history. I'm sure there's 15 books about it. And Elizabeth, when you go, ride the streetcar. That's that's one of my recommendations. Don't go to the casino, ride the streetcar. Elizabeth worked with President Trump and also from a big major metropolitan area, Gotham City. Elizabeth, anything else you want people to know about you who didn't see your previous appearances?
No, that's basically it. And my apologies. Also, I was texting your team because I couldn't get myself unmuted. I was not just fooling around on my phone, I promise. But no, that's it.
It's all right. I'm sorry I teased you about it. I thought you were trying to break some news. Because we've been breaking news during this program on a regular basis. All right, lots to talk about. And again, grateful to you both for being here. If you want to be in on the conversation with these two fine people, please raise your hand. If you're here on the two-way platform, if you're watching on YouTube or X, raise your hand. No smack in the chat. No smack in the chat. And peace, love, and understanding for all. Presumption of grace extended to all, which is very common in New Orleans. About the nicest people in America live in New Orleans, in my experience.
I agree.
They're just so nice. And Elizabeth couldn't go to Mother's, but just so you know, Mother's is my favorite restaurant in New Orleans. Just an incredible place. I don't know. Elizabeth, will you eat in a non-kosher restaurant but eat kosher food?
Yeah, basically I can't have anything delicious, but I can have like pasta or vegetables or fish.
Yeah, there's something. You could have the fried fish at Mother's probably, which is very good.
I'd make it work. Yeah. We'll figure this out.
All right, here we go. As I said, the president today, number one in this Oval Office photo op, after, I don't know, I'm sure the president would acknowledge it was in response to the pushback from the mayor and the senator and the governor. But the president today said, maybe send the National Guard to New Orleans. Here he is, number two. Here's the headline, New York Times. Trump floats sending the National Guard to New Orleans despite a drop in crime. Again, Democratic mayor, but Republican Governor Landry, former House member. Here's number two. This is the president saying D.C. is safe, and he's choosing his next location. Number two, please.
A totally safe city. You're not reporting any crime because there is none. They said crime is down 87%, and I said, no, it's not. It's down 100%. We have a great thing going. I could do that with Chicago. We could do that with New York. We could do it with Los Angeles. So we're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago or do we go to a place like New Orleans where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough, quite bad. So we're going to be going to maybe Louisiana, and you have New Orleans, which has a crime problem. We'll straighten that out in about 2 weeks. It'll take us 2 weeks, easier than D.C. But we could straighten out Chicago. All they have to do is ask us to go into Chicago if we don't have the support of some of these politicians. But I'll tell you who is supporting us, the people of Chicago. And I sort of want them to let it be known they have incompetent people.
All right. So, Elizabeth, if the president said, I'm trying to choose between Chicago and New Orleans, what advice would you give him?
I don't think I'd be giving advice. I think it's interesting that this is the debate that we're having, right? This is what people end up asking him. I feel like the way this has been reported on has been the problem. I think Democrats would have had more of a win if they were kind of debating the legality of what he was doing instead of trying to convince America that there was no such thing as crime in any of these cities. I'm glad that he's bringing up, obviously, going into Republican led areas because this is crime, right? It's about our security and it should have nothing to do with politics. I'm sure he's probably going to hit most of these cities no matter what. It just depends on the order that they're in. But the fact is, I think the way that this has played out has been really, really bad for Democrats because, again, every time you turn on the TV, they're trying to convince the American people that there is no crime in these cities instead of actually doing what they should be doing, which is thanking Trump for what he's doing and maybe arguing the legality of this decision. But it's just, I think it's another losing end of another 80-20 issue that they found themselves on. And I hope he keeps going. I really do, in every city that needs his support.
I mean, let's start at 40,000 feet because I'm curious what your general view is. How do you feel in general about this process the president has begun in D.C. and now talking about other cities? Is this a big issue, a small issue, a distraction, something important? How do you view it generally?
Yeah, Mark, look, I think it's all of the above. And look, I talked about this earlier. I worked in city government for a long time in my career. And so this particular issue hits home for me. And when you think about what's happened in DC over the last few weeks, the moment that President Trump sent the National Guard here was the moment that the city had just announced a 30-year low in crime. One. Secondly, there was a hurricane that was barreling across the East Coast. And some of those states that actually sent their National Guard were those states that were going to be potentially hit by the hurricane. On top of that, FEMA was decimated. And so when you talk about strength, you talk about making this a stronger country, like those are three things that just did not. And so on top of that, you're now using DC as an example on how to get into other cities. And I think that's where the president's a little bit wrong. He's got to remember that over 75 million people did not vote for him. And so his mandate is not to be a dictator or to be a fascist. His mandate is to figure out ways to work with mayors, to work with governors, to make, if DC's crime level is already 30 below, the lowest has been 30 years. Let's make it lower. Let's make it near zero. Let's work with the mayor. Let's work with the mayor of Chicago, the mayor of New Orleans. When you talk about Chicago, and look, my thought to mayors, to Democratic mayors across the country, and I've said this for a few months now, you got to step aside from the politics. President Trump is distracting what's going to happen in the midterms with all of this sort of enforcement of immigration and crime and sort of taking over these cities. But what mayors have got to do is they've got to make sure that their cities are run well, their cities, that their services are delivered well. They got to make sure that the policies that are most important to their people are things they can ask the federal government for. So I would tell Brandon Johnson in Chicago and LaToya Cantrell in New Orleans is make a list of things that Donald Trump and the administration can do to help you make your cities better. You saw what LaToya Cantrell said today, the mayor of New Orleans. She has recently worked with the federal government pretty closely to produce a Super Bowl after a terrorist attack. And so I think the rhetoric that these mayors do not want the support, they've been crying. When Mitch Landrieu was mayor of New Orleans, he was yelling and crying for the federal government to put more money into cops, the community program, to put more money into community policing, to give us more money to find more police to put on the ground because recruitment was low, not just over the last 4 years, recruitment's been low over the last decade. And so I think if President Trump really wants to make impact, he will figure out a way to sit with these governors and these mayors. And if I were these mayors, I will flip it back and say, look, here's my list of things that you can do. Chicago's a beautiful city. New Orleans is a beautiful city. Detroit, all of these cities. But here are things that we can do to make them better. Here are the 5 things that you can invest through HUD, through FEMA, through the Housing and Hospitals Association, all of those things. So if you can figure out how to do that, I think there's a win-win for the people because the politics of Donald Trump's playing right now is going to be a lose-lose.
Okay. So you're both very thoughtful and you're both concerned about public safety and the public interest, and yet you don't seem to agree about much based on what you initially said. I've tried this before. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Elizabeth, start with you. What's something about this issue that you think the two of you would agree on? Just can you think of something based
Yeah,
on
no, I
Jaime
actually
said?
disagree. I was nodding along to most of that. I
Okay.
think we agree on everything. I think maybe we've spent less amounts of time with President Trump. So every time someone tells me they don't like him or don't support him, I tell them, look, I can't blame you because maybe you're reading what you're reading and you weren't around him for 8 years, and I don't know what my opinion would be if I didn't have the experience that I had. So I think it's kind of more underestimating whether Donald Trump is coming at this from a good place or not. But in general, we basically agree. I think a lot of these elected officials should publicly state that they want to work with the federal government, with Donald Trump. They should explain, like you very eloquently said, in a list of things what they need. They should ask for those resources, and we should prove that Democrats and Republicans can work together, even if they didn't vote for Donald Trump, even if they said horrible things while he was running, because the people of this country should come first.
So would you say that they should not only put the list together and say it publicly, but they should do what people do in intergovernmental affairs and actually try to work through the actual list?
Yeah, I mean,
Of
think about
course.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
agree, Mark, and I think Elizabeth
Yeah.
and I definitely agree with this. And I've been saying this, and I think a lot of Democrats have been saying this for quite some time now. And over the course of the last 12 months through the 2024 campaign, and now there have been two things that have been clearly the issue on American people's hearts, and that's immigration and security, and that was partially created by President Trump being so good about keeping the message front of mind, one, and then secondly, by President Joe Biden not paying enough attention to it. So those two things were clear.
Right.
And then I think secondly, the cost issue. I think people really care about that. And so security and cost are two things that I think Elizabeth and I can agree on.
If you were an advisor to the mayor of New Orleans and she came back and said, well, I presented the list, but they want the National Guard to be on the streets of New Orleans. Is that a non-starter for you, or that's perfectly reasonable from your point of view as part of a package?
Look, and I must say this too, just so you guys, there's a mayor's race that's happening in New Orleans right
Yeah.
now. And so the mayor, LaToya Cantrell, is going to finish her second term. She's lame duck. And so I do think this conversation is going to have to happen with those campaigns as well.
Yeah.
And so, look, I think Mark, what we got to not do is villainize the people of the National Guard. The National Guard itself has been a tremendous operation that has saved many lives and has been really instrumental in making sure that this country can prevent disasters and recover from disasters. And so I think that's one. And so I think what people's issue is, why were the National Guard deployed to a city to not do anything, or particularly not do what they would say they were going to do, particularly around immigration? And so I think if we could be clear why we're bringing these National Guard, why are we asking cities, neighboring states to send National Guard, and we can actually make impact, I think most cities will welcome that. I mean, we're talking about crime for so long, and it's not just Donald Trump is not this grand panacea that's going to prevent crime and stop crime forever. And so I think if we can use this time to, if the National Guard is a part of that process, let's put that into the process. But let's make sure that our goal is to eliminate crime, not just on the surface level, but the root causes of those crimes.
Okay, I want to do one more thing on this issue and then move on to the Epstein situation. Let's Polymarket this. Our partners at Polymarket have a Polymarket up now about whether or not bettors on Polymarket believe that the president will deploy the National Guard to a blue city in the next 12 days. So let's put that up. This is number 5. Will Donald Trump deploy National Guard to a blue city by September? You can see a few days ago, it was up to 70%. It's now down to only 21% chance, according to the bettors on Polymarket, that he'll do it. So let me ask each of you, Jaime, do you think it's higher than 21% that he's going to do this?
I think so, and I think what's happening in Louisiana right now, and I think the welcoming of Governor Landry, and he talked about welcoming the president from New Orleans to Shreveport, which sort of symbolizes a red city and a blue city. I think he starts with those types of states. I think we've talked about the fact that he's targeted blue cities in blue states, and so I think for the purpose of rhetoric and for publicity, he's going to go to a city like New Orleans. And it seems like, as it stands, that this mayor is going to welcome that in some capacity.
Yeah, Elizabeth, where would you put the odds the president deploys Guard to a blue city by the 15th, 12 days from now?
I'd say 40-50% or so.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's very more likely than
Yeah.
21%. And I think, like you said, there's a reason he's doing this. I think he's going to make sure that the narrative sticks, that he's not just attacking blue cities. He's trying to obviously fix an issue that affects, plenty of cities in our country that happen to vote differently. So I do think it's very likely it happens. I don't know if by the 15th, but it should happen in September for sure.
Okay, let's talk about Epstein and Maxwell. Always on this story, putting victims and whether they're adults or children, victims first. And we know that there were children victims based on the conviction. We know that today, Ro Khanna and Mr. Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and two attorneys and a number of women telling stories about their experiences with Epstein and Maxwell spoke, including some for the first time. Almost all their stories were about Maxwell and Epstein. And as I see it, there's two issues. One is how were they not investigated? How did Maxwell get such a sweetheart deal after his conviction? Who was involved in that? And that story remains to be told. And there's obviously culpability there from others who allowed, aided, and abetted them. There's no doubt. This other issue of whether there was a massive child sex ring was only raised by one person, one of the women who spoke. And so I want to show you what she said and ask you about it. And then I want to ask you about the reaction the president had to their press conference. Here is one of the women speaking today, number 8, please.
Transparency is justice. Release the files, end the secrecy, and stand with us in declaring that no one, no billionaires, no politicians, not world leaders, is above the law. And let me announce now, several of us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list of names. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Now together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know were regularly in the Epstein world. And it will be done by survivors and for survivors. No one else is involved. Stay tuned for more details on that. Because history is watching, and so are the women who will come after us. Thank you.
So no names were discussed. It raises the question of whether the information they have they'd ever presented to law enforcement. Jaime, what do you think of what she said and its implications for accountability?
No, look, Mark, I think we can all agree that this is an issue that should be completely looked under and after, and some sort of resolution, whatever that means, sort of comes to bear. And I think most people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, are really concerned about what happened here. But here's what I am concerned about, and with all due respect, and not to be callous, with all due respect to the survivors, and I'm happy that they were able to speak out and to take the narrative over themselves. But I think what we do, and those of us who are doing media and those who are out there, we talk about this from a political perspective, and I think that's one, unfair, two, not doing it complete justice and credence, and three, I think it's going to probably lessen the issue in people's minds on the ground a little bit more than I think what we're trying to do. As much as we're trying to draw attention to it, I think regular people, I've been in 4 states over the last 2 weeks in one territory. I think regular people on the ground just are not talking about it the way we're talking about it. And so I think what they want to see is some resolution to happen. If it's the president implicated or whomever, billionaire or whomever is implicated here, they want to see it come to a resolution, but they don't see it affecting their everyday lives as much as certain things like the bill that we didn't talk about a lot, like inflation, things like that. And that's just not my perspective. That's what I've been hearing on the ground. Yep.
Elizabeth, one of the women today said that the person Jeffrey Epstein bragged about knowing in terms of famous people most was Donald Trump. And then shortly after they spoke, this is what the president said at the White House. This is number 7, please.
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. It reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more, and nobody's ever satisfied. From what I understand, I could check, but from what I understand, thousands of pages of documents have been given, but it's really a Democrat hoax because they're trying to get people to talk about something that's totally irrelevant to the success that we've had as a nation since I've been president.
Elizabeth, people ask me the question almost every day, why would the president call this a hoax? You know him well. Do you have a sense of why he's calling it a hoax when it's very upsetting to the women who spoke on Capitol Hill today?
Yeah, look, I want to start kind of by echoing what's been said here. I mean, the victims have to come first. And I mean, I was distraught watching that this morning. I mean, some of them look younger than me, and like seeing them capable of smiling up there and speaking as powerfully as they were, it struck me quite a bit. And I think we should all put politics aside when discussing this issue. At the same time, of course, I get the president. I mean, the question about the president regularly, and obviously when it comes to this today, I knew that I would be asked. I was asked about it on ABC 20 minutes ago before I joined you here. I know the president well enough. For me, when I hear him talk about this, I think he's very clearly talking about the way it's been reported on. I think when it started, the reporting was, just so you understand, Donald Trump is losing a good chunk of his base due to this issue, which was not the case. And then after the fact, it's him being upset that the media is attacking him daily for not, releasing more information when they never went after Joe Biden's administration for the same thing. I think for him, the hoax is the way that this is being covered, as if it's 100% Donald Trump's administration's fault, and nothing's been reported on fairly over the last few years when this issue has been around for quite some time. I think that's how I see it. That's what I think he's responding to. I hold the president in very high regard. Like you said, I know him very well. If I thought anything otherwise, I would say it right here, but I just don't. I also think the way that he's been asked, the timing of some of the questions are very unfair. I remember, I think it was that televised cabinet meeting the same day as the Texas flooding. He was asked about this, and he was literally talking about children's bodies being recovered when this was coming up. I know it comes up when he's talking about foreign policy, and I think when he's saying no one talks about the accomplishments, it's why do you so badly want to twist this and make it more politicized than it needs to be? And the fact is, he knows the information has to come out. He knows how upset people are on both sides of the aisle. He knows members of the Republican Party, very high-ranking officials, are going to work until more information is released. So I think we're all on the same side here. I don't want to politicize it more than it already has been by several people on both sides.
Yeah.
And I just hope to God these women get the transparency and the justice that they deserve.
The way you phrased it's the best explanation I've heard. I'm very grateful to you for sharing that. I'm going to ask another question. It's not a gotcha question. It's really to try to understand the whole thing because you do know him. Why wouldn't he say, in conjunction with saying it's a hoax, how badly he feels about the victims?
So again, I think it's going to come down to what happens next. I believe Marjorie Taylor Greene asked him to meet with them, and he didn't respond one way or the other. He hasn't yet. I'm curious what happens next. I have been around him long enough to see a lot of major issues come up and hear him not want to actually comment on it until he has all the information. There's plenty of times where people think that he actually speaks before he thinks, and I know he tweets a lot, and everyone has that thought of him, but actually I think he wants to meet with all these members of Congress who were in that meeting with these women. I think he wants to see if he has to meet with them himself. He wants to see what information might come out before he says anything. But again, the timing of these questions is really the issue. If it was a press conference on this very matter and he showed up there to talk about it, I think more than anything, he'd be happy to not only answer questions on the topic, but of course, tell these women what they deserve to hear and, pledge some kind of effort to make sure they get the answers that they want.
So grateful to both of you for the tone you brought to this, and so admiring of how respectful and balanced you were about trying to explain the whole thing. So thank you both. Two more topics, then we're going to get to your questions. If you want in on the conversation on any topic, including what we discussed, please raise your hand. This is the president asked in the Oval Office today if he's got a message for Vladimir Putin. We've talked on this platform quite a bit about whether the ball's in the president's court or Putin's court. Here's the president, and again, I want you both to focus on his tone here and sort of his attitude. This is number 12, please.
I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. Whatever his decision is, we'll either be happy about it or unhappy. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see things happen.
Elizabeth, my read on the president is he's not too optimistic anymore about Putin coming to the table. What's your sense?
I'd say the same. I would definitely say he's less optimistic than he was. I think you phrased it right before you played the clip. Whose court is the ball in? And unfortunately, it's always in Putin's court because he's the man that is unhinged and can do whatever he wants and is, beholden to no one and answers to no, morals or anything else that we think about here in the United States or anything that we assume the president of the USA has to think about. This is a crazy murderous dictator who does whatever he wants and knows that no one can really stop him. So the ball is unfortunately in his court. I think things are a little different with Donald Trump being in the White House, but I do think this has been quite a situation for him that he didn't expect. I think things were handled horribly for the few years that Joe Biden was in there when this could have been handled a very different way. I am not happy with what I've seen on either side, Ukraine or Russia, Republicans, Democrats. I think the whole thing is a horrible mess. I can't believe how many people have died and that we are 3 years in still having to have this conversation. I'm hoping for the best. I think that meeting was a great first step. I mean, for him to stand there with Vladimir Putin on American soil with, behind them, I think it read pursuing peace. It was a great step in the right direction, but it doesn't really mean much when we're talking about the man that is Vladimir Putin. I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping anyone can have a real proper conversation with him and convince him of anything. It's probably Donald Trump, as crazy as that sounds, but I'm not as optimistic as, I was a few years ago hoping this would end, or a few months ago, just because we see the direction it's going, and I don't think this man cares in any way, shape, or form about the lives being lost.
I'd love for you to just comment on what Elizabeth said, agree, disagree, annotate.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sort of two schools of thought on this, and I'm only admitting that because I'm on the record of being of both schools of thought. But on one hand, I completely agree with Elizabeth, and I think about 7 months ago when President Trump became president, talked about the entreaty to Putin and Russia and others around the world who have been sort of annexed outside of diplomacy for many years now. I thought, he's the new president, and maybe he has the right to do that, and let's see what happens. We're at the point now where we've seen what happens, and so the other school of thought is, look, Vladimir Putin, he's been in power in some capacity, and you guys know this. I'm speaking to the preaching to the choir capacity for over 5 decades now. And so he's not going to all of a sudden change his tactics because Donald Trump's the president, a person who's never been in politics before and only sold real estate in New York and elsewhere. That's just not the way this works. And so I hope President Trump now realizes that. And what you saw in China, that was a spectacle between those countries that are saying to Donald Trump and to America, we are not your friends, we are each other's friends, and we're not on your side. And so I think President Trump's got to wake up and he's got to see that. And what we want, as Americans and Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, whatever, we want our president to not only say that he's America first and be pro-America, to show that he's pro-America. And so I think as much as Donald Trump has said it over the last 7 months, this instance, particularly with Vladimir Putin, think about this. Russia, and Elizabeth talked about what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine did not ask for a war. Russia decided to invade Ukraine further. We saw what happened with Crimea, and we talked about this ad nauseum. We talked about Crimea with President Obama to ad nauseum. And since then, Putin has gone in and taken more of Ukraine by force and killed more Ukrainians and allowed more of his own people to die than we could have ever imagined. And this is Putin's fault. This is not Ukraine's fault at all. We can't both sides it. And so I hope President Trump finally admits that and figures out a way to help and support Ukraine. I think the problem is, and this is something we've all thought about, you think about, signs of a Cold War, you think about things that are make the world less safe. I do think President Trump's trying to be as cautious as possible. We don't know what Vladimir Putin's going to do. We don't know what he talked about with North Korea and China and India. And so I do think that there's some consideration there. But initially, he's got to just admit that President Putin is a bad actor and he's not a friend of America.
Really thoughtful again for both of you. Last topic real quick, and then we're going to get to your questions. So please raise your hand if you want in. New York City mayor's race. As of now, Mayor Adams is not out. Curtis Sliwa is not out. But my sources suggest it's moving in that direction. So here's a little bit of the front runner, Democratic nominee Mr. Mamdani, reacting to the reports that these two guys might be offered Trump administration positions to leave the race. Roll that, please.
I am angry. We have not seen a president of this country seek to fundamentally alter the nature of a race, all with the intent of preventing the Democratic nominee from succeeding. I don't care about who we will face in November. We'll beat them all.
All right. So, Elizabeth, your city, it's wrong to say Democrat nominee is a lock to win because Giuliani won and Bloomberg won, not as a Democrat. So if Mayor Adams gets out of the race and Sliwa either gets out or he's minimized, would you make Cuomo the front runner at that point or not?
I honestly still wouldn't. It would make me a little more optimistic, but I actually don't think it means that much. Again, look, this is happening very late in the game, and it's happening, if it happens, because Donald Trump is offering positions to these men and not because they decided to sit together and say, how do we put New York
Yeah.
City and the future of New York City above our own egos? I mean, Eric Adams is currently in charge of leading New York, and he is polling at 7%. That man should say, hey, the people have rejected me, and bow out. And he's not. So it's a very uncomfortable situation. I don't like Mamdani's policies. I disagree with him on everything, but he has played this brilliantly. He's a great politician. He's a great speaker. Cuomo has hidden from every camera and every microphone. Every time he speaks or puts anything out on Twitter, it's the wrong thing. I don't understand why Democrats couldn't find someone better. I think the party really underestimated how popular someone like Mamdani could be versus a name like Cuomo. I don't think they're realizing that 2025 is very different from the Democrat or Republican parties of 10, 20 years ago. But I think it's the wake-up call they deserve. It's the wake-up call New York deserves. But no, I would not say this puts Cuomo at, a life-altering advantage. I think it's a better situation for him, and that's it.
Jaime, who would you make the front runner, and how should Cuomo handle this?
Look, I largely agree with Elizabeth on that. I don't know. I still think to a certain extent, if you had asked me this a couple months ago, and a couple of my friends did, and I think I've asked this on television, I did not think that Mamdani was going to emerge the way that he did. But to Elizabeth's point, Governor Cuomo campaigned in a sluggish manner. He did not show up for the people. He was dismissive of allegations of the past. He was not remorseful. He was not youthful. He was not going out there and listening. He was just not doing the things that you do and he's and has been, and I use this word very loosely, you guys, because I do politics for a living, but he has traditionally been a political athlete. And he and his family, starting with his dad and even his brother who's on media, they are very gifted, and they are very gifted communicators. And Cuomo did not show any of that in that primary. And Mamdani was the exact opposite. And here's what we're seeing, you guys. When you see a Donald Trump, when you see a Mamdani, when you see an AOC, a Marjorie Taylor Greene, those type of people get elected. They're on different sides of the spectrum, but people are saying the same thing. Those are populist messages. People are saying we're hurting. We want more. We want more access to participate in society and participate in politics. We want to be seen more. And so instead of us rejecting those notions, as we've done with President Trump, we're doing with Mamdani and other Democrats and socialists and other Republicans on the Tea Party side, we've got to figure out why these individuals, these voters, these citizens are so they feel so disenfranchised and disenchanted, and look at those root causes. And so we look at New York. New York is a perfect example of this. No one's asking for Eric Adams to, be the mayor again. Two, for him to be the secretary of anything in this country. He has not proven, and if that's a sweetheart deal that he's going to do, that's going to be unfortunate. That's going to be a bad use of politics, but no one's asking for him to be a part of the federal government. That's just a fact. Yeah. And so I do think it's an example of how other cities, we've got to be mindful of what people are saying. Look at the crosstabs. Why are people voting this way? What are they saying with their vote? They're not just voting for Mamdani because they think he's cool and he's young. There's something that they're resonating with. There's something in New York. New York is not affordable for everyone right now. The crime levels in New York in some areas are not great. Transportation is not great. And there are things that housing has been one of the biggest issues. And these are things that Mamdani's been saying. These are things that even Donald Trump said when he ran for office the first time. And these populist messages, that's because people want to see something happen in their lives that's different than's happened, over the last few decades, few hundred years.
Yeah. If these guys do get out, we know what Mamdani's going to say, a version of what we just heard him say there, which is don't let Donald Trump pick the mayor of New York City. I'm really curious to see what Cuomo would say at that point. Seems to me he's going to have to define it in a way that that doesn't have a backlash. Because I think you could easily see Mamdani being helped by this. To go to Elizabeth's point, I don't think it's automatic that Cuomo becomes the front runner, particularly if he doesn't handle it well.
And Mark, can I just say this one thing?
Yes, sir.
If I were President Trump, and I hope he's not listening, Elizabeth, don't tell him, I would probably want Mamdani to be president over Cuomo. I mean, think about what mayor. Well, maybe president one day.
No, he's born in Uganda. He can't be president.
Well, talk about Cuomo.
Okay.
And so I think what we saw in 2020 and when President Trump was president the first time, Cuomo was one of the chief defenders. Before there was J.B. Pritzker, before there was Newsom, before there was Wes Moore, that was Andrew Cuomo. And so I do think Republicans are probably over-indexing on trying to get behind and consolidate. Or maybe they're playing chess and maybe they want Cuomo to have that veneer and then lose. But I do think I would be a little cautious of that.
Yeah. All right. Again, in 1 minute, we're going to get to your questions. So if you're here on the two-way platform, want to get in on the conversation, with these two bright people, please raise your hand. One more word for another sponsor, CB Distillery. If you're tense, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're recovering from a sports injury and you need to feel better, recommend CB Distillery's products. They're made from CBD. They're pure. They're no fillers, just clean ingredients. They're premium ingredients. Over 2 million people trust their products. And I'll say again, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having trouble relaxing, if you're feeling like you need a change in your life, these work for so many. Again, as I said, over 2 million people trust them. You can get better sleep, less stress, feel good about things in a way that maybe CB Distillery products can help you. Right now, save 25% off your entire purchase. Visit CB Distillery. Use the promo code TWOWAY. Use the promo code TWOWAY. Again, that's cbdistillery.com. Use the promo code TWOWAY. You get 25% off. Give it a try if you're feeling like you need a little bit of help sleeping, relaxing, or recovering from injuries. All right, let's go to your questions now. As always, raise your hand if you want in on the conversation. Come on in, tell us where you are, favorite restaurant in New Orleans, and what's on your mind. Robert, unmute, go ahead.
I have to admit, I've never been to New Orleans, so
Hi,
I mean,
this is nuts. This is one of America's great cities. We're going to organize a two-way field trip.
We'll do a fam tour. We'll do a fam tour. One
Yeah.
for non-Republicans and one for
Yeah.
Republicans, like Elizabeth, and we'll get you guys all acclimated to the city.
All together. Robert, I recommend it.
Okay.
What's on your mind? Robert lives in
So
Pennsylvania.
solely, again, the two questions I have, just the first one is about the crime issue. I mean, Mark, you were in Europe recently, and I lived in Europe for a number of years, and it was commonplace in Western Europe to see fully uniformed, fully, rifled, grenaded soldiers everywhere, whether that was in Germany, France, anywhere, Belgium. So I don't understand what the reluctance is to having some surge of free federal help coming to your city to help tamp down.
Okay, I'll answer it first. I know for some people, and some people are open about it, they just don't trust President Trump. And for some people, it's a federal issue. They just don't believe the federal government should play that role. And we do have a tradition in this country. We don't really like having the military on our streets. But Jaime, weigh in, and then Elizabeth and Robert will get to your second question.
Yeah, no, Mark, I think that's exactly what it is. I think we've been so accustomed to personal liberties like that we forget that those things were fought for on our behalf. And so, look, I said this, Robert, and I think that's a very astute question. I said this earlier. If I were a Democratic mayor or Democratic governor, I would make a list of things that President Trump and his administration can do to help make these cities better. And in some instances, there may be some use of the National Guard. And so I don't think it's an all-out rejection. I think what's a rejection is becoming a police state. And so I think there's this narrative right now, be it false, and it seems to be less false than not, that President Trump is trying to create, a sort of his own police force, and own police state. And so I think that's the hesitation right now. It's not rejecting the resources, it's rejecting the motivation behind it. And it's not trusting that Donald Trump's vision is aligning with what you're trying to accomplish. Nearly 99% and 100% Americans probably feel the way you feel, and they're probably asking themselves the same question. Even those who live in Chicago and New Orleans and Detroit, they're like, whoa, I feel a little unsafe when I went to the grocery store today. I would love to have a National Guard person standing outside the grocery store and making me feel a little bit more safe. But for people who are watching this a little bit closer, those things snowball a little bit. And I think people are saying, once you start that step, the next three steps, you don't take the National Guard off the streets. You only put more on once you start deploying. And I think that's what people are afraid of.
Elizabeth, how do you feel about hypotheticals? Will you entertain one?
Yeah, sure.
What if there were unrest in Boise, Idaho, or in some rural area of Idaho, and President Barack Obama said, "I'm going to send the National Guard in to restore order"? Would you say great, or would you say that's a federal violation, intrusion on state and local?
I mean, genuinely, and I'm trying to be honest, if I was seeing the clips like what I saw out of California a few months ago, I mean, if I'm seeing people actually try to pummel police officers with rocks, I would celebrate the president.
Let me add to the hypothetical. The Republican governor of Idaho and the Republican mayor of Boise said, "Mr. President, keep your National Guard out of here. We'll handle it." Would you support it?
Again, if this was 10 years ago and I was a dumb teenager listening to Rush Limbaugh or whoever else and saying whatever he says is right, then probably not. But no, look, I'm trying to be honest. I genuinely think what we've seen has really been enough to constitute what Donald Trump is doing. I think it's too much. And I think the majority of people, if they put politics aside, are happy to have this kind of help. I really do.
Yeah. All right, Robert, second question, please.
So, I mean, you talk about police state, you should have seen the FBI crawling all over Pennsylvania here after January 6th. I mean, with the Orwellian billboards and everything, I'll tell you. But apart from the police state issue, what I would say is on the Ukraine issue, when simply just, and I hate to dial it down to this metric, but when do the Ukrainians like run out of men? I mean, has anybody like calculated that? I know that, I mean, how much more are they going to put them through before there are simply no more Ukrainians left? Because this is what Putin's doing. He's doing the traditional Russian game of attrition that's won wars against Western powers such as Napoleon and Hitler. I mean, for centuries, just keep grinding these people out until there's nobody left.
Yeah, I know that they have changed the subscriptions, the conscription terms, but you're right that this is time is on Putin's side. He's got more people to throw in there, and it's unfortunate. It's one of the reasons President Trump is eager to try to end this now, because the damage to Ukraine is going to last from a human point of view and an infrastructure point of view. It's going to last forever. Either of you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I think, Robert, I think that is a salient question and feeling, and that is one that we're all asking. And for you to say it out loud, I mean, that is just a question that we're asking right now. And it's an unfortunate question. Like I said earlier, this is not a war that Ukraine asked for, but without America and other countries getting more involved, and none of us want that, more involved, we're getting to a point that Vladimir Putin has got to make a decision that he's had enough and he's lost enough Russians and irrespective to what's happening, Ukrainians, he's got to feel like he's lost enough people or he's getting enough sanctions from America or UK or whatever. And unless he feels squeezed enough, you're right. He's going to pummel this country down until there's almost no existence.
Just
and I think that's his goal. Yeah, that's his goal.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
I mean, it's so complicated. Again, my entire family is from this region. When this started, I was, screaming Team Ukraine from the windows, and I was so upset about everything happening. And I'm still obviously Team Ukraine when it comes to the two sides here. I just think the whole thing was played so wrong. It's so unfortunate. And I just remember the 2 years of Joe Biden and his administration trying to solve this, and every Democrat on TV saying we have to send them more and more and more for a victory, and asking myself, what does a victory look like? They're not going to pummel Russia and destroy them. There's not going to be a decisive victory like that because, you asked when, is it going to stop when Putin runs out of men? He doesn't care how many Russians are killed. He doesn't care if he runs out of the whole country. These people are insignificant to him. So I don't know what that victory looks like, and that's why any kind of diplomatic resolution with this man is so difficult. But I'm very optimistic. I'm hoping for the best, but it's a very, very hard spot to be in, and especially for the U.S. to try to put a stop to it.
Robert, thank you. Very grateful to you. Haley, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for Elizabeth and Ima.
Hi, guys. From New York City. I wanted to basically test a theory that I've been thinking about. It's kind of fast forwarding to 2028 and regarding the Democratic side. I've always told I'm very center, I'm an independent, and I didn't vote for either Kamala or Trump, but I've always told my liberal friends and family, give me a liberal. I'm very excited to, see a Democrat to vote for in the future. And I'm very open-minded to Gavin Newsom and his new trajectory and everything, but I have in the back of my mind, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, and I want you guys to, weigh in on this, but for some reason, I feel like the candidate that's going to be picked in 2028 will have to somehow reconcile with the progressives. So the primary candidate needs to be elected by the base, which would, in my opinion, these days would be the progressive, the far left faction of the party. But then they would have to, win a general election, and that would mean going, moderating as much as possible. So I'm trying to factor that in my mind, how does a Democratic candidate in 2028, is this something that they're going to have to reconcile with? Is this an actual issue, or can
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom be nominated by, anybody and then win a general election?
Yeah, great question, Haley. How you first? How do you see that balance? As you know, well,
Yeah.
historically, the party has nominated not the most moderate, not the most liberal candidate, but
Right.
more of a moderate candidate. Although the
Yeah.
party's pretty far left now.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Look, here's one thing that I truly personally like and love Governor Gavin Newsom. I'm a huge fan of Governor JB Pritzker. I love Wes Moore, and I love talking about 2028 politics. But so many things are going to happen between now and 2028, I've talked to people, those who are politicians, lobbyists, consultants, voters about Gavin Newsom over the last 2 weeks, and everyone's like, "Let's get us to the primaries and let's go and elect Gavin Newsom." There's so many things that are going to happen between now and then. I think what we've got to give Gavin Newsom credit for is leading the charge and fighting right now and using his state and using his ability as governor and using his quote unquote liberal state to fight back to what President Trump asked to happen in Texas. And so that's just one thing. The second thing, when you think about the primary, what's going to happen to the DNC? I was in Minnesota, Mark, last week for the DNC. They still let me in the door sometimes. And a lot of the talk of the town, Haley, was about the early state calendar. So when you think about the primary, people are going to start campaigning in 2027, but in 2028, in February, they're like, is it going to be Iowa? Is it going to be New Hampshire? Is it going to be South Carolina? Is it going to be Michigan? Is it going to be Georgia? That calendar will dictate how well a politician starts off doing. And so, for instance, let's think about if New Hampshire, becomes first in the nation state, and Gavin Newsom, who's been there a bunch of times, Pritzker's been there a bunch of times. Gavin Newsom seems to be doing well there. You go from there to Iowa to South Carolina, and you light a spark. I think there's a chance that a Gavin Newsom or a Pritzker or Wes Moore, they will do better because they're better known right now. But I do think, just to kind of push back a little bit, the party has traditionally nominated candidates like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, John Kerry, Barack Obama, those candidates who are more centrist candidates. And so I think the base of the Democratic Party is more center left than it is left. I think what we've seen is, and I give a lot of respect to AOC and what she's been able to do to motivate voters, but we've seen people like your Congresswoman AOC have a lot of energy and take up a lot of oxygen when it comes to media and being online. But when it comes to the base of the party, you think about, these are Black people like my mom who have been in church their entire lives, who come from a more socially conservative basis than will be some lefty liberal from California. And so those people make up more of the base of the party. And I think what Gavin Newsom's trying to do, and when you see that he's trying to moderate himself a little bit, he's trying to appeal to people like my mom a little bit more. And so they won't just think of him as some California governor. And so we don't know. I said a lot to say we don't know what's going to happen. I think what President Trump is doing, he's giving all these governors right now their stage and their spotlight. And he's saying, hey, Newsom, let me see what you got. Hey, Pritzker, let me see what you got. Hey, Wes Moore, let me see what you got. And he's going to do that with all the Democratic governors and anyone who wants to run for president. And I think it's up to them to use that to connect with voters as much as possible.
Thank you. We're almost out of time. Thank you, Haley. Elizabeth, two things. One, we learned there, amongst other things, that Haima likes all the candidates in all the states. Very diplomatic. Elizabeth, one name. Who would be the most formidable general election candidate of the Democrats who seem to be considering running?
I mean, honestly, at this point, probably still Gavin Newsom. But I mean, truly, there's a reason Republicans are celebrating right now, even with someone like Mamdani rising up and threatening to destroy New York, because we see that as the demise of the Democrat Party. They don't have anyone that can fill an arena and then also win a general election. It's a very awkward time. However, I will say, I was going to say this before, I don't know how many people will believe me, but in both 16 and in 24, when Donald Trump was up against, I think it was 17 candidates in 16, even in 24 against Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump was the common sense centrist candidate. He is technically more middle than a Ron DeSantis, for example, and he won and took the entire base and the whole Republican Party with him. So you never know. It's about having a once-in-a-lifetime candidate like a Barack Obama was, like a Donald Trump is, and that guy might still emerge, or woman.
Yep. Very grateful to you both, Elizabeth, for coming back. Haima, for coming up for the first time. I hope you'll both come back regularly. Grateful to you all for being part of the community. Turn right now over